For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Marvin. I'm the principal of Marvin Strategies and a consultant for Everytown for gun safety. I serve as the veteran engagement lead for Everytown and Moms Demand Action. Today, we're going to be talking about secure firearm storage. We're going to be joined, or we are already joined, by our subject matter expert presenter, Kathy Giesland, who is the Deputy Director of Programs at Everytown for Gun Safety. We'll also, in about 20 minutes, be joined by our distinguished guest, Congressman Ruben Gallego. He's a Marine Corps combat veteran who represents Arizona's 7th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Looking forward to speaking with him soon as well. For those of you who are new to the forum, Veterans for Gun Sense 2020 is a virtual forum of military veterans hosted by the Everytown Veteran Advisory Council. It discusses and takes action on gun violence prevention priorities for the 2020 election cycle. And we meet bi-weekly for an hour just like this, and we'll continue doing it until October, right before the election. Our goal is to enable military veterans to support efforts to elect a gun sense majority in 2020, and in the meantime, just have some interesting conversations about gun violence prevention issues and specifically how they intersect with the veteran community. Let's see, how about talking about Everytown is, including its grassroots arm Moms Demand Action, is the nation's largest gun violence prevention organization. There's more than 6 million supporters. I know that a lot of folks who have joined this are Moms Demand Action volunteers, and we're really glad to have you here. And then finally, the Veteran Advisory Council at Everytown is a group of 30 veterans with diverse backgrounds who advise on Everytown's veteran strategy. We believe that all veterans were taught the 3 pillars of military gun culture, which we name as training, safety, and accountability. We want to see more training, safety, and accountability in our civilian gun laws and culture. So that's kind of what we base what we do. We spread the word about this forum through an Ask a Buddy system, and we're going to look into some more creative ways to get more folks on this call as we expand in the coming weeks. And we'll explain more about the Ask a Buddy system later today, but we appreciate everybody's help with that. Quickly going over the Zoom rules, everybody who's been on this knows this, but this is informal and conversational. For the first time, this is being recorded. Like I said, that'll allow us to distribute the event to members who can't be here at this exact moment. Everyone on this call is a veteran with the exception of a few Everytown staff members. Mara Lamendola is my co-host and can help you if you have any problems with anything throughout the call. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're talking. And then if it's possible, we do like you to leave your video on so we can see you where you are, but we know this is a busy time of night, so we won't mandate that people do that. But if you can, especially during the Q&A, that would be great, especially during the conversation with the congressman, so he can see lots of faces, not just photos. When we get to the Q&A, use the hand raise icon, the virtual icon, and Mara will call on you when it's basically in order and allow you to ask your question out loud. And with that, I will jump right into our topical discussion. What we like to do is sort of 3 parts to this meeting. And last time I was running behind for technical reasons and we had to skip over, but we like to start by talking about something that's topical, something in the news that has something to do with veterans and gun violence prevention. And this one is a big one that isn't veteran specific, but sometimes could be. And that's the fact that gun sales are spiking during the COVID era, more so than they have following any other major incidents, following mass shootings, stuff like that, when gun sales did tend to spike. A recent Politico article, which I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat for everybody, talked in pretty decent detail about this gun sale spike. Hold on, I have to change my chat to everyone. Can't do 2 things at once. There you go. It talks about the fact that the NICS system, which is the FBI's background check system, has processed more than 1.4 million background checks this past May, compared to about 823,000 in May of 2019. In addition, while an average month might see 10,000 prohibitions on sales, usually less than 10,000, but up to 10,000 prohibitions on sales via NICS, the month of March 2020 saw 24,000 blockages of sales, which is great because it says that NICS is doing its job, the FBI is doing their job on prohibiting gun sales. but it's still an increase that's disproportionately greater than the increase in background checks itself, which means that more dangerous and prohibited people are attempting to buy guns than normal. So this immediately brings up the issue of access for prohibited buyers. As many of you know, the way federal law works right now, background checks are only required when a purchase is made from a federally licensed firearms dealer. And background checks are not required by state law in 28 states, meaning that in those states, sales can occur legally from person to person. For example, that could be a prohibited buyer, someone with a felony conviction or restraining order, can go onto an online platform, and then an hour later be in a Walmart parking lot getting an AR-15, right? And they wouldn't have passed a background check otherwise. Likewise, ghost guns offer an opportunity for prohibited buyers to obtain a gun through the mail with only minor drilling and assembly required, which is super scary. Those guns aren't even serialized in any way, shape, or form. And conveniently, our next 2 sessions will be on ghost guns and then on background checks, respectively. So if you can join us 2 weeks and 4 weeks from now, you'll hear about both those topics in more detail. Finally, I do want to mention that this influx in NICS requests also brings to light the issue of the Charleston loophole. And it's a loophole that's actually, it's a law that says if a background check initially returns as delayed from the FBI, meaning the FBI needs more time to investigate, the FBI actually has only 3 business days to return a decision on that individual. And if they don't, and many times they don't, then the sale can just proceed with no completed background check. And this puts guns in the hands of dangerous people as well. So it's a real issue, and just more, it's always an issue, but more so during COVID. And finally, even people who are purchasing these guns legally, who pass background checks, aren't necessarily competent gun owners, right? So they don't receive any training. They aren't going to be accountable if something happens with their guns many times. And often they don't have the equipment or the knowledge just to store their guns safely. This is all really scary, these first-time gun owners who don't know what to do with it. And it's going to lead to an increase in unintentional gun deaths and suicide by gun. Which brings us to our topic for today, secure firearm storage, and our subject matter expert, Kathy Giesland. And I am really pleased to have the pleasure, I shouldn't say that, I just have the pleasure of introducing Kathy to you all. So Kathy, give a wave if you can see Kathy on your screen. Kathy Giesland is the Deputy Director of Programs at Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action. She's been with Moms Demand Action since just after the organization was founded. She oversees day-to-day operations for the Be Smart program, which is a campaign designed to help parents and adults normalize conversations about gun safety and take responsible actions that can prevent child gun deaths and injury. Kathy's here to talk with us more about secure gun storage and Moms Demand Action's Be Smart program. So I would like you all to welcome Kathy, and I'll give it over to you. You can share your screen, Kathy.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. All right, let me get my screen up here. All right, we got it? Great, so thank you again for that introduction, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for having me and participating. And I am excited to dig in a little bit about talking about gun storage, secure gun storage, and Moms Demand Action, Everytown's campaign, Be Smart, like Chris mentioned. So I'm not sure how many of you know that there's a reboot of the 70s sitcom One Day at a Time. The present day version of this show centers around a Cuban-American family and focuses on a single mother, Penelope, who's an Army veteran dealing with PTSD. And last year, the show talked about guns, and Penelope actually addressed secure storage. Obviously, this is fiction and an overdramatic generalization for TV, but I do think it speaks to the breadth of this issue and normalizing conversations about secure storage and what an important component that is and how that integrates into our work and how we can keep our kids and communities safe from gun violence. So like Chris just talked about, America has seen an alarming spike in gun sales since COVID-related lockdown started, which has really, of course, intensified the need to talk about secure gun storage. As we know, a lot of people are introducing these firearms into their homes for the first time. So there was previously not a firearm, again, as Chris mentioned, so they don't have the actual ability to understand how to secure it or the tools to do so. And an interesting thing tragically, is Everytown collects information about the incidents where a person under the age of 17 unintentionally shoots themselves or someone else. They're tracked on what we call the Not an Accident Index. It's a map that we have on our Everytown website. And we know that since the start of the year, there have been at least 174 unintentional shootings by children that resulted in 67 deaths and 114 injuries. But over 50% of those unintentional shootings occurred in April, May, and June alone. So it really speaks to what we're talking about. So again, the COVID-19 crisis has created new challenges for parents and everybody. Kids are out of their regular routines like school and daycare and camp, and they're spending more time at home. And the boredom and isolation that they may be feeling could pose an additional risk to their family and to themselves and to safety in general. So what can we do? How can we even take action from home during these times? Our Be Smart campaign was launched just over 5 years ago, and it was designed to help all adults normalize conversation about gun safety and then take responsible actions that can prevent child gun deaths and injuries. Be Smart emphasizes that it's an adult responsibility to keep kids from accessing guns, and that every adult can play a role in keeping kids and communities safer. And what's really unique about this is just people to people. We are not looking to change laws or policies when we're talking about Be Smart. So I'm just going to break down the acronym for you real quick. We know that 13 million households with children contain at least one gun, and the majority of children in gun-owning households know where that gun is stored. So the S is secure all guns in your homes and vehicles. So when we talk about secure storage, what does that mean? It means storing guns locked, unloaded, and separate from ammunition. So hiding a gun is not considered secure storage. So putting it in a nightstand or up above a refrigerator. I'm going to talk a little bit more about secure storage in just a minute. But for right now, I'm just going to move on to the M. The M is model responsible behavior. Modeling responsible behavior means that smart adults make sure that kids don't have the opportunity to even access a gun. So we certainly believe that you should talk to your kids about gun safety, but keep in mind that that's a precaution and not a guarantee. One study found that young children who go through a week-long gun safety training are just as likely as children with no training to approach or play with a gun when they find one. The A is ask about unsecured guns in other homes. There are approximately 4.6 million US children living in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. So even if you are confident in your storage methods and your guns are stored securely, you can't always be sure about how friends and family members might be storing their firearms. So that's why you need to ask. The R is recognize the role of guns in suicide. So let's just talk for a minute about the important intersection of guns and suicide. Most people who attempt suicide do not die unless they use a gun. In fact, 90% of suicide attempts result in death, which is a much higher fatality rate than any other means of self-harm. And this contributes to the fact that 40% of child suicides involve a gun. So if you know that a loved one is in distress, you may want to consider temporarily removing a gun from your home, or if a friend or family member is in distress, working with their loved ones to temporarily remove a gun from their home or guns. And then finally, the T, tell your peers to be smart. So spreading the Be Smart message is really key to this program. Talking about secure storage and asking about guns is how we change cultural norms about gun safety. So again, we don't have to pass laws or policies to do this. I also like to point out that research shows us that law enforcement, the military, and hunting and outdoor groups are particularly effective at communicating secure storage practices. So I just really like to highlight that your voices hold a really great amount of power during these conversations. So let's talk again about secure storage, the S. So I already mentioned that staggering number. Every time I say it, I am a little overwhelmed, that 4.6 million children in the US live in homes with loaded, unlocked guns. But let's talk a little bit about the risk to our community as well. So in incidents of gunfire on school grounds, the majority of shooters under the age of 18 obtained the gun from their home or a home of a relative or friend. And research also finds that secure storage is associated with a decreased risk of firearm suicide and unintentional firearm injury among children. And one study showed that households that locked both firearms and ammunition had a 78% lower risk of self-inflicted firearm injuries among children and teenagers, as well as an 85% lower risk of unintentional firearm injuries. So again, I'm going to clarify what I mean when I say secure firearm storage. Guns should be stored locked and unloaded with ammunition stored separately, and hiding a gun is not sufficient. And I also want to point out that unsecured guns contribute to the staggering number of guns that are stolen each year. An estimated 380,000 guns are stolen from private gun owners every year. And gun owners are 3 times more likely to have a gun stolen if they carried a gun in the last month. So we also know that 1/4 of stolen guns are taken from cars. So putting a gun in a glove compartment or under a seat wouldn't be considered secure storage. So just to let you know where this intersects with our work, we have Be Smart volunteers, some are on this call, that are everywhere. They spread this message, of course, in non-COVID times at tabling events or conferences and at community events, but also what's important and what we know we can do in a time like now is have one-on-one conversations or presentations like this. We have social media, email templates, and more. And of course, I'm here to be a collaborator and a thought partner if you have any suggestions. We know that educating communities can be very nuanced. So that's it. I'm ready to take some questions.
Thank you, Kathy. That was fantastic. Any folks who have questions, use the hand raise icon, and then we can have Maura call on you and take you off mute. Or you can just jump off mute and ask the question right now if you like.
I can't figure out the hand raise icon.
just ask the question, Scott.
Yeah, I've got a quick question, Kathy. My Mom's Demand Action chapter, we're trying to get more gun safety locks because one of the things they've been able to do is at various community events, obviously not much now, but they were giving out gun safety locks, and they were able to negotiate with several of the local police forces to get a free booth for that. Is there, through Everytown, the possibility of getting some of those gun safety locks?
That's a great question. So we don't currently fulfill gun locks right now as an organization. However, what you're doing is perfect, working with law enforcement. We also know a lot of people have had success, certainly talking to this group, with veterans groups and veterans administrations locally. So I would recommend that. However, if you're working with your chapter already, your chapter leader can always talk to their organizing manager, and they can contact me directly if we think there's a situation where we need to elevate it and figure out a bigger distribution method.
Okay, or is there a place that we can purchase them for the chapter?
Yeah, so that's how you would want to work with your chapter leader. They'd be able to let you know what the budget is, and then the types of lock that we are okay with. We also have a disclaimer if it comes from us directly that needs to be included.
Okay, yeah, because it was the Moms Demand Action chapter president that asked me to figure it out, and I was like, let me.
You know what? Just email me, and I'll make sure that we get you all the right information. You've got my email right there. It's a great question.
Definitely, and Karen has their hand raised. So Karen, you can go ahead and unmute. I think if not, I'll unmute you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, great presentation. Thank you. I've heard this lots of times, of course, being with Moms Demand Action. But the question that I have is, I'd love to be able to do this presentation for some more specific groups like veterans. But the materials, I was wondering if there's are there any updated materials or anything that's able to that will allow us to maybe change some of the verbiage and stuff, that the terms and things that are used to be more, I guess, tailored to an audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we currently have 3 versions of this presentation. We have a 20-minute presentation that you're probably thinking of that's our standard. We also have a version that is intended for a medical community, a medical audience, we talk about the patient provider relationship in those. And then we also have a version in Spanish. So one of the pieces we ask of our volunteers is that we want this presentation to be delivered consistently throughout the country because it is a national program. I think to your question, Karen, what would be helpful is if you have an audience and you're looking to integrate more specific statistics, email me because I'd love to talk to you about what that looks like. And the other thing that I always like to point out, especially when I'm talking to a group of people, that their voice is, like I said, really important. It's a really great way to deliver the standard presentation that we already have, and then include your own section where you talk about either your relationship to this material or, maybe bring in another friend that wants to speak from the point of view of a veteran, so that you're really getting kind of the best of both worlds. I hope that helps. But again, if you have a specific audience or have any real specific questions about a group, I'm always happy to answer those. So you can always email me.
I think we have time for one more. Felicia has her hand up, so go ahead, Felicia.
Yeah, so in my area, I'm in California in Corona, Norco area, and we've been trying to get a Be Smart presentation into our school district, and it's been pretty difficult. We have heard about I guess it's like the NRA's version of Be Smart, called the Eagle something or other. I was just wondering if you have any pearls of wisdom about, how to present Be Smart as something that is providing more than the NRA's version, because that's basically what we're up against right now. We can't get Be Smart in our district at all.
Yes, I understand that. So one, that's Eddie Eagle, and Eddie Eagle is designed to educate children, whereas Be Smart is very definitely designed to educate adults, because we know and believe that adults are the ones that have the responsibility to keep kids safe. And as I mentioned, we do know based on research that even kids that go through a week-long gun safety training are still just as likely as kids with no training to touch or play with a gun, which is incredibly important research, especially regarding what you're asking, if you're really getting pushed up against Eddie Eagle. The other thing I would say is the Be Smart campaign is very successful all across California. So if you're looking for specific school districts that you want to hold up and elevate to your school district and say, they've been presenting this in, Los Angeles United School District, as a way to sort of give a little bit more credence to the campaign, I'm happy to send you a list of places where else we've delivered it in California.
I would really appreciate that.
Sure, yeah.
We've been trying for a little while now, and they're not responsive.
Great. If you just want to send me an email, I'll make sure to get you that information.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Kathy, thank you so much for the presentation. Really insightful stuff, and thanks to everyone for the great questions. We're now going to move on to the primary part of our forum meeting today, and that is an interview with Congressman Ruben Gallego, who I see has now joined our meeting. Congressman, great to have you. Thank you. A brief introduction. Congressman Ruben Gallego represents the 7th District of Arizona in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's currently serving in his 3rd term. Representative Gallego is a Marine Corps veteran, a lifelong community leader, and the son of Hispanic immigrants. He was the first in his family to attend college, graduating from Harvard University with a degree in international relations. Congressman Gallego enlisted in the Marine Corps and deployed to Iraq in 2005 as an infantryman, serving with Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines. His company saw some of the worst fighting in the Iraq War, losing 22 Marines and a Navy corpsman to enemy action in 8 months. Following his experience in Iraq, Congressman Gallego committed to ensuring that servicemen and women are never sent into harm's way without a plan for winning the fight, securing the peace, and providing post-conflict medical, psychological, and familial care. Representative Gallego is a member of the House Armed Services Committee and the House Natural Resources Committee. And we at Everytown for Gun Safety and the Veteran Advisory Council are very pleased to be joined by Congressman Ruben Gallego. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So what we've been talking about, Congressman, is safe storage of firearms. It's an issue that underlies so many of America's gun-related problems. We know that storing guns in the home locked, unloaded, and separate from ammunition drastically reduces both the risk to an accidental shooting and the risk of death by suicide. There's a few quick stats that I'm going to go over. Some of them have been said earlier in the call. Some are new for those folks whose brains kind of need that data to understand an issue. But to put this in perspective, suicide accounts for 2/3 of gun deaths in this country. Only about 3% of suicide attempts are by gun, but 50% of suicide deaths are by gun.
Successful.
Yeah, that's because when a gun is used in a suicide attempt, its lethality rate is 90%, which is much higher than other means. Veterans are actually 1.5 times more likely to die by suicide, and instead of 50%, it's actually 7 in 10 veteran suicides are by gun. And perhaps most importantly, and surprisingly, I think, is that 1 in 3 gun-owning veterans store at least one of their firearms unsecure and loaded in their home. So we think veterans know how to take care of guns, but oftentimes they don't in their home. Congressman, we're going to get back to guns, and that's totally why we're here. But before we do that, I do want to talk a little bit about you and your background and kind of how you got to where you are today. You're a 3rd-term member of the House of Representatives. You represent Arizona, but you were born and raised in Chicago, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So as someone who was also born and raised in Illinois, I have a very important question to kick off this interview. I'm sure you're a supporter of the Diamondbacks now, but I need to know, Cubs or White Sox?
Cubs.
Oh, okay. Whew. That scared me. I was going to have to end the interview if it was White Sox, but we're on the same page.
I even will show you something I just got in the mail from one of my best friends. It's my favorite baseball player, and it's one of his rookie cards.
Ryan Sandberg.
Yeah.
That's my favorite baseball player.
Yeah.
So okay, we're already, this interview is already a success.
Is that right?
That's an awesome baseball card.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
For those that aren't from Chicago, maybe New York people understand, but you have to pick a side. You can't go both ways. So, but now we got that out of the way. I want to talk about your military service. So you're the son of immigrants, first in your family to go to college. You chose to join the military after you graduated and you enlisted in the Marine Corps. You eventually deployed to Iraq, as I mentioned. Talk about your decision to join, your experience in the military, and what led you to continue your life of service as a political leader in elected office.
Well, I think there's a misconception here. I actually joined while I was in college. Okay. I didn't join after college. I joined while I was in college. I left school because I was forced out. I had got really bad grades one semester at Harvard, and they gave me an option: either leave for a year and then reapply, or just move on with your life. And so I decided, you know what? I've always wanted to join the Marine Corps. I'd wanted to join the Marine Corps before I went to college, and my family thought I was being an idiot because I received this full scholarship to Harvard. And they said, why are you going to go join the military? You have a full right to Harvard. You're wasting your life. Don't do that. Don't be an idiot. And I should have listened to my instinct, which is go serve first and then go to college. After 2 years of college, they asked me to take a break. I decided to still stay at Harvard. I take a 1-year break. And within that time, I decided to fulfill what I always wanted to do with my life, was to serve. So I actually joined, walk into a recruiter's office. I tell them point blank, I want to, be a Marine, and I'll join the reserves now, and then I'll make a decision. I want to become an officer later. The recruiter was pretty astounded because I came and asked directly for infantry. And he tried to guide me to this or that. And I'm like, if I'm going to join the Marine Corps, I'm going to do infantry. If I want to do anything else, I'll join the Air Force. They have better standard, better living, nicer people. I kept on refusing to budge. And finally, my recruiter came back and said, you can join as an infantryman, but you'd have to leave in the next week. And you can't fail any of the the different levels from the point you join all the way until the point that you graduate as an infantryman, or else you will not be able to make it back in time to go to school. So I took the challenge and I joined, and honestly, I loved it. I always wanted to serve my country. I wanted to really repay my country for how they accepted my family, how we were able to succeed and really take advantage of the American dream. And subsequently, after two active duty tours, And then the last one where I just saw way too much combat to last for the rest of my life. I realized that becoming an officer was not the best way for me to serve my country. And I came back to the United States and started serving more in the public service area.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I didn't mean to imply anything. That's a really interesting story. I think atypical. And the other thing that to me, something I really like about the platforms that you promote that may be atypical, honestly, is that you're very vocal about issues related to armed conflict and the after effects it has on those who engage in war. But you kind of come at it from a different angle. It's not the, to me, I don't read it as the chest pounding support the troops kind of thing. You're really thinking through the entire process. And I've done a lot of work personally with the concept of moral injury. And this idea, for those who don't know, that service members are attempting to reconcile their role in war, particularly that of taking a human life. I've always landed on the idea that moral injury is in many ways a function of society's role in war, right? Like the more engaged a society is in choosing to send their friends and neighbors to war, the less likely it is that people come home with moral injury. And there's a comparison we can make between our generation and World War II, but we don't have time for that at the moment. But can you talk to me about sort of what you see as the responsibilities we have as citizens? And I mean both you as a member, but also like your entire constituency, right? So the citizens, to determine how and when our military is utilized in armed conflict. And likewise, kind of talking about how that responsibility translates, not just to sort of going to war, but the full continuum, and thinking through a service member's life after their time in uniform.
Well, I think the biggest problem you have right now is that those that are sent to war tend to be a very isolated group, and those that actually feel the wars are therefore also isolated. And it's kind of the concept of the spoils of the common, where we as citizens in a democracy get to enjoy the defense, but without having to actually usually put in any of the effort to that defense. And a lot of it's because our wars are more sanitized now. I think a lot of it is because, we don't have a draft. So it's usually coming down to two populations of people that are serving. Those that are coming from largely historic military families that produce, kids, sons and daughters that always serve. People like myself and Aaron Marquez that are first time, members of the military that serve, but largely from Hispanic and immigrant backgrounds. And then, people tend to be from lower middle class and middle class people that want to serve, not necessarily just for money. But because of that, you're only looking at 1% of the population right there. Even within that 1% of the population, there's even a smaller population of that ends up being combat arms and will ever get injured or cause other injuries to other people. So everyone gets to basically live this gravy train, right? And the way that people make up for it is by putting up the the yellow ribbon, putting up bigger and bigger flags, and contributing to veteran nonprofits. When in reality, what we should do is make some hard decisions about whether or not men and women should be going to war. Maybe actually pay them a decent wage when they are at war. Number three, make sure that we have a VA that's fully staffed and functional. It seems like it's we're very quick to cut taxes, but we're not very quick to raise taxes to pay for some of the holes that have been created by these wars. And for me, I've always thought we should have a war tax. Maybe you don't serve in combat, maybe your family doesn't serve in combat, but you're getting the net benefit of us serving our country, and we should at least impose a war tax so people can understand that this is a united effort, and that you just don't get to float for free.
Yeah, fantastic. Appreciate that point of view, and I think that as veterans, we come home with a lot of different insights. One of those insights is on guns, right? Like, we've been trained, we understand guns, and so Everytown for Gun Safety put together this Veteran Advisory Council, which is a group of 30 different veterans from across the country, from diverse backgrounds, who advise Everytown on their veteran-related strategy. I mentioned this earlier, but we focus on what we consider the 3 pillars of military gun culture. They are training, safety, and accountability. And then we kind of made those up, but every time I talk to a veteran, they're like, yeah, training, safety, accountability. Yeah, those seem like the three things that my drill sergeant drilled into my head.
Yeah.
And that's why they call them drill sergeants, right? But you know,
We call them drill instructors, but yeah.
yeah, there you go. Sorry, an Army guy here. The fact that we have these interactions with all of our weapons, and we treat them all with this respect. Training, safety, and accountability are those tenets that allow our military to be a high functioning profession of arms and to protect our force from unnecessary casualties. So can you speak a little bit to your experience with the military, the weapons training and weapons use, and how that impacts the way you think about gun culture in the United States and in Arizona today, particularly our topic of the day, safe storage?
Gotcha. Well, I was very lucky to be trained in weapons platoon. So I obviously did my 0311 training, and then I did my School of Infantry training specializing in mortars, which also allowed me to cross-train with every weapon below your, so the what is it, 243 Golf, I can't remember actually is, which is the machine gun that's carried by weapons platoon, as well as the shooting the 50 cal tow weapons, the small. Of course, I was an assistant gunner in the war, so I'm very fluent with the saw. And then I carried in Iraq an M16A4. I was trained in, you know what, Peter Lucier, you're gonna get it. Yeah, M240. Thank you, Alonzo. Unlike Lucier, who's just throwing me under the bus. In Iraq, though, I was a rifleman, not a mortarman. And just mortarmen are infantrymen that can do math. You just have to remember that. But I was trained with all 80. I know, David. It's your nephew, not you. But so in the mortars, I trained with the 80 and the 60, and then everything all the way down to the Beretta. And look, for those that are Marines, you understand we don't even get to really shoot the weapon. We're basically trained to hold the weapon for months first. And everything that comes with it, all the safety conditions, the four rules of handling a weapon. And every night we secure our weapon. If you guys, I don't know, maybe I'm older, but the way we secure our weapons, we used to tie a lock directly through the rifle right into our bed, so it would not move, and it was accounted for every day. You had to make sure you read the serial numbers every day, and then even in theater, we had our rifles around us all the time, and we had to account for our weapons all the time. We had to account for our ammo all the time, and if you were in any way you're responsible with your weapon in a combat zone, especially around your other fellow Marines, you'd catch hell. You'd really catch hell. And it really is shocking to see a couple of things. Number one, how easy and prevalent it is for someone to pick up, an AR-15 weapon or its variants. And for those that have shot it in combat, that weapon is designed to kill as many human beings as possible. There's just no other way for us to deny it. Everything from the hand grip, the pistol grip hand grip, so you could actually hold it into your shoulder while running and chasing another human being. The way the round impacts a human being. I mean, we were trained in and talked to that the reason an M16 round doesn't actually take down somebody is because we want it to bounce around the body, so it causes so much damage that your enemy military has to spend time and effort and resources on that person, right? So what do? We turn this weapon into a civilian weapon that largely is almost the same thing as what we have, except it doesn't have a full auto option, which you can actually do aftermarket. And it's being used, by people that have very little experience, but are able to obtain it, and has been used largely, in most of the last, mass murders that have happened in this country. And then even the lackadaisical attitude, that's just one area. The civilian attitude about even how they hold weapons, like every year, especially around Christmas, seeing people holding their weapons, pointing at things you're not supposed to shoot. not keeping a trigger, not keeping their finger off the trigger until they're red flag. All these things that just, you know, drive me nuts. And then hearing all the time, and especially in Arizona, children and even people that are adults that are inebriated getting to weapons that are loose and are easily accessible, and creating these unfortunate, you know, unaccountable murders. And I think there should be some strict laws about that type of accountability too. But it happens all the time. It is absolutely infuriating. We have this culture that people are growing up with in a gun culture, but they're not growing up with the responsibility that actually should come with that culture. And I think, you know, there needs to be some level of both education on the nonprofit side, but also some level of accountability from government to hold people accountable. Like, I don't see, you know, prosecutors going after some of these parents that are keeping their weapons in open spaces and are being then used by their kids. I think that is one of the first steps that we need to be taken care of now.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing we're trying to do is to incorporate the veteran voice into those conversations. And I think you know, you mentioned people around Christmas time, you know, with photos or videos, you know, pointing the weapon at their family members or whatever. Pete Lucier, despite his wisecracks on our chat here, he wrote a fantastic article in an op-ed in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch a couple weeks ago, talking about that incident that many of us saw, the guys, the two husband and wife on their lawn.
Oh yeah, they were flagging each other.
That's what it is. They're flagging each other, especially him with his assault weapon. So
yeah,
so yeah, as veterans, we have a chance to speak up on that. The other thing, and this brings us back to some of the data I shared at the beginning. The other thing we have to speak up on being veterans is suicide. Not just veteran suicide, all suicide, but you know, in my intro, I mentioned that 7 in 10 veteran suicides are by gun. And meanwhile, the VA recently finished their prevents task force and released their roadmap. I looked at the report. I was, you know, cautiously optimistic, and I realized that in a 65-page report, the word firearm was not used until page 41.
right.
It appeared only 8 times total in the entire report, and it was condensed all into a single recommendation, just across 3 pages. So it was like, okay, we'll talk about guns for these 3 pages, and the rest of the report, we're going to ignore it. You know, as far as I'm concerned, that makes it feel like they're ignoring 70% of, or at least minimalizing 70% of veteran suicides. And it's not uncommon. We see federal officials who are often reticent to talk explicitly about guns with regard to veteran suicide. Instead, we put all of our eggs in the basket of mental health. So as a congressman, tell us, and a veteran, obviously, you know, talk to us about your view on the use of guns in veteran suicide, and how our country and our political leaders can have a multi-pronged discussion about veteran suicide that doesn't diminish the mental health aspects of it, but that really elevates in the conversation the fact that the lethal means behind 7 in 10 veteran suicides is guns.
Well, look, we have to look at it this way. If veterans were using vehicles to kill themselves, I think you'd have a lot more restrictions on vehicles, especially those that we think are a danger to themselves. So one of the things that we are very keen on, at least in Congress, is red flag laws. And that did pass in the last Congress, this Congress, as part of our overall gun control package bill. But that would actually be one of the biggest aids, I think, in my opinion, to stop some of these veteran suicides. The ability for these veterans to easily obtain weapons, even though they may be psychologically incapable of making the healthy decisions for themselves, I think is probably one of the easiest things we could tackle right now. And the fact that you know, you'll see civilians actually getting red flag laws because they're getting most of the therapy is being identified and taken care of, you know, outside some VA centers, and they're being identified as red flag potential conflicts. You're saving lives versus, you know, right now, because of the power of the NRA, and I think with this administration also, you're going to see the VA and VA therapists very unlikely to recommend red flag laws for some of their patients. So I think, number one, that's a very big mistake. We need to have a kind of a holistic approach to veteran suicide. So obviously the therapy side is really important. As someone like myself who suffers from PTSD, it matters, it helps. But for those that are needing the extra help, in terms of preventive measures to try to stop them from making a decision that they can't take back, we need to be doing everything. And a red flag law makes a difference. We have seen in states that actually have instituted red flag laws, veteran suicide by handguns going down. It's not as much as we'd like to see it because this is a new phenomenon. And I think there's also, unfortunately, a culture where people feel that we should not be taking away weapons from veterans, but any veteran that's a danger to himself or to somebody else should be subject to these laws.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that answer. I'm going to move on to the Q&A part. And for folks who have a question for the Congressman, please just use the hand raise icon. That'll put you in line to ask a question. Aaron Marquez has raised his hand, so Congressman, I have to ask you: are you willing to take a question from Aaron Marquez?
Pass. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Aaron. Come on, you and ask your question.
Hey, Congressman Gallego.
How about it?
Hey, I've been on the Veterans Advisory Council for just over a year now. This is a nonpartisan, bipartisan group of veterans on the call, and in the name is common. Veterans Everytown for gun sense, and these should be common sense things. So I guess from your experience in the State House here in Arizona and in the Congress, how have you been able to use your veteran identity and veteran voice to kind of have conversations across the aisle? And then specifically, one of the things this Veterans Advisory Council is, I think, there's been broad support, no matter our political backgrounds, for gun safes. And, it's sort of a state by state policy right now. But at least gun safes in homes for, homes with children, it seems like that's a no-brainer across the political spectrum. But what's stopping stuff like that from happening?
Sure.
And sort of how does your veteran identity help you reach out to the other side?
Well, so I mean, not specifically talking about guns first. Obviously, being a veteran allows you to connect to other veterans, even Republican veterans on the other side. One of the first things I did when I first got to the State House is I reached across the aisle to an Air Force veteran and worked with him to pass in-state tuition for veterans in Arizona. And now more than, I think, 2,000 students have used that bill. They moved to Arizona. It's automatically, in the policy in Arizona is if you move to Arizona, you're an automatic veteran. I'm sorry, you get automatic in-state tuition, which therefore then matches with the modern GI Bill. So something that I'm very, very proud of. But the other way that it helps in terms of reaching across the aisles when it comes to talking about guns is because, first of all, I don't call them guns, I call them weapons, just because that's a habit that's been drilled into me by the Marine Corps. And also the fact that I can talk about weapons in a manner that shows that I have some level of expertise and can talk to them about it in a manner that is based on safety and not necessarily on culture. And you'll find a lot of opposition from the right when it comes to issues of guns, more based on gun culture, not on issues of public safety or policy in general. Where would I think, what do I think is stopping this? Look, the NRA still has tons and tons of power. Now, this year they're becoming a little less powerful because they have less money because of the levels of corruption they've dealt with. But the culture, the gun culture that they've created around it, it has become a litmus test now, right? It's like you have to be, anti-gun control, anti-Green New Deal, anything you can think of to basically, kind of create this environment that makes you the kind of arch conservative, right? And so it's going to be a habit we have to break. The way you break it, I think, especially with elections, is you have to just elect more moderates, especially on the right-hand side, so we could really come with a good negotiations. For example, Peter King that's leaving from Long Island, some that I used to be able to work with on many types of legislation, and now he's leaving. And I think, unfortunately, the person that's going to replace him is going to be good on our issue, but we're not necessarily going to have a Republican that's good on that issue in that area. And so, I hope that next year with the Democrats potentially take over, I know this is a nonpartisan organization, but that we're going to have a sensible gun control majority in the House, in the Senate, and especially in the White House to pass these types of legislation we need to pass.
So that's exactly what we're working really hard for, is that gun sense majority, and get some of those fantastic bills that you guys have passed in the House to actually be discussed in the Senate. That would be a welcome change. Background checks, red flag laws. I'm going to move to somebody who has actually run for Congress in the past in North Carolina. Scott Cooper, go ahead and ask your question, my friend.
There we go. Thanks. It's good to see you, Congressman. I just kind of want to segue on what you were talking about at the end of your statement there. My own perception is that finding consensus or compromise or common ground is really challenging, especially on this issue. There's lots of history of compromise. I mean, I remember, for instance, when George Herbert Walker Bush decided to give up his NRA membership, I was hopeful for where we'd go with that. But what I've seen is it's really challenging, especially on the right, for anyone to say, hey, there's some common sense things, and we're certainly trying to empower them. Have you seen any opportunities of folks on the right that you've been able to say, like, hey, there's some common sense ideas that we can get?
So we've, like, for example, I was giving the example of Peter King, I think is one good example. I think that there was some initial hope after the Las Vegas massacre, where people wanted to get rid of the repeater adapter that allowed
bump stock,
the butt stock in order for it to become a fully automatic, and then eventually was adopted by the president in executive order. I think it is a hard environment right now. I think you're right. I don't believe it's an impossible environment, and I think we just have to kind of keep building the majorities we need to. And then sometimes we have to look at the local level. You see what happened in Nevada, for example, when they became the pro gun control, pro common sense gun control state. They passed some pretty progressive pieces of legislation. The same with Colorado, and I think you're going to see the same thing happening in Arizona. I also would like to say that I think there's a lot of places that have the opportunity to make these decisions at the ballot box. And if we actually would take up those actions, as a matter of fact, I think Nevada actually did run theirs through the ballot initiative. You'd be able to pass a lot of these initiatives by pretty strong margins. But it does take time. I think you're going to have to build time over coalition. I think you're going to have to create a political environment where, especially on the right, moderates can win, not just win, accidentally. But the leadership at the end will have to come from the left side of the aisle, and then hopefully you get some Republicans to come along with you. Even the Manchin-Toomey bill of 2000 and, God, what was it? Someone remind me here, 2014, which was a very scaled down bill, ended up still being struck just because of a filibuster. And we had, Republican support there. But I hope that this next time around we have that same type of bipartisanship that occurred around Manchin-Toomey. I think this time politics is going to be a little different. If a very popular common sense law is stopped by the filibuster, I think this would probably perpetuate the beginning of the end of the filibuster, which could be a good thing or a bad thing overall. But I think this is something we should be on the lookout for.
I think we have time for one more quick question. David Lucieres has had his hand up for a while, so please, David, go ahead and ask your quick question.
Well, you finally figured out how to do it, David.
I had a good coach. Actually, two of the questions I had were already answered by you, so I've run out of questions, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I'll yield my time back to somebody with a new question.
That's good.
That seems like convenient, because the only other question was from Pete Lucier. So go ahead, keeping the family there, Pete. You can ask your question.
Thanks for being here, Congressman. I really appreciate it. So you're on the House Armed Services Committee and on the Personnel Subcommittee. Yeah. And so recently, as we've heard stories around, crime in the military and also punishments, one of the big questions has been around metrics. Like, are we even collecting the right data to know about issues relating to sexism? Are NJPs being handed out? Issues around. And so with your position on that committee, and I realize it's on the the active duty side and the reserve component side, not the veteran side. But is DoD doing enough to collect information on mental health issues? Does DoD know how many service members own weapons? Are they putting those things together? Where can Congress, and specifically the committee and the subcommittee, conduct oversight better? And where can DoD produce better numbers and metrics? Just how can we institutionally work on these issues?
So there certainly are some metrics that we're keeping. They're not entirely great. Specifically when it comes to like sexual assault, sexual harassment, we're actually getting much better. And it had been in the last couple of years, thanks to the leadership of Chairwoman Spears. Pardon me, I have a new puppy here that's fighting at something. No. Then, in terms of, crime, that's not a great statistic that we're looking at right now, in terms of it's very difficult to find the statistics. We just recently found this out with our problems at Fort Hood, which, obviously on surface looks really bad, but we actually don't have any data for us to tell us where it's coming from. Within what ranks is it prevalent? Does it happen on weekends? All these kind of things that we should be able to research. The one area that we're doing much better on is kind of in terms of the UCMJ. And good news is we know we would identify a problem through data. The bad news is the data is not showing us the best about the military. People of color, specifically Black men, are more likely to be prosecuted by the prosecuted under UCMJ, or given page 11, or given any type of an informal reprimand than their white counterparts. And that's something that the Armed Services Committee is looking at deeply now to try to figure out how to change that. In terms of SMI within the active military side, it is difficult. You're dealing with a lot of, number one, just hesitancy by the active duty member themselves to report, and those that do get help have a certain amount of they have a certain amount of discretion in terms of what they need to report to their own command. So that's a good and a bad thing. We don't want people to feel that if you admit that you're having any issues, that your command's automatically going to know about it. But at the same time, we do need the overall data. So in terms of the community within, let's say in a battalion, how many of them are actually seeking treatment, whether it's PTSD or other issues, we don't have that data. I think we want to get that data, we have to take care of it very gingerly, because you don't, again, want to dissuade someone from looking at help. But in terms of who owns weapons, in terms of in bringing them on base, I believe I'd have to go back, but I believe they have to declare they have a weapon on base when they check in. But the problem is there a national data set that I could tap and go down to Camp Lejeune and see how many people in Camp Lejeune have a weapon right now? I don't have that access. Something that we can think about, though. It's a good idea if we believe it'll bring us some good data.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the question, Pete. That brings us to time, actually a couple minutes over, so I don't want to keep anybody longer than we have to.
Yeah,
Congressman, thank you very much. Just a few housekeeping notes for the group. Please share the survey with other veterans that you can vouch for, who could enter into this forum. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, or sorry, two Tuesdays from now, August 18th. We'll be at 8 p.m. and we'll be on ghost guns. Our Rob Wilcox from Everytown Veteran Gun Safety will be presenting, and our distinguished guest will be Representative Max Rose of New York. Finally, thanks to Laura LaMendola, the Everytown staff who helped out with this. Thanks to all the members of the Everytown VAC for supporting this effort, to Kathy Giesling for joining us, and of course a big thanks to Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona for his time today and for his service to our country, both in the Marine Corps and in Congress. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up, and hope to see you all in 2 weeks. And please don't forget to go invite a friend, ask a buddy to join this. Thanks, folks. Have a great night.